Committee will come to order. As we open our hearing today, I'm certain we all are mindful and remembering and prayerful for those in Oklahoma. And our former colleague, Governor Mary Fallin, who is addressing that tragedy today with the storms there in Oklahoma. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. American companies, the U.S. government, and private citizens are facing new challenges in the fight to protect our nation's security, economy, intellectual property, and critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. Today, the Energy and Commerce Committee is exploring how the private sector and our government are responding. We will also review the implementation of the President's Cybersecurity Executive Order 13636. Cyber attacks have grown in scope and sophistication to include nearly every industry and asset that makes America work. That is why this committee is well positioned to lead, oversee, and review policies and solutions to these wide-ranging and evolving threats. Last year, an Al-Qaeda video surfaced calling for a covert cyber jihad against the United States. On Sunday, the New York Times reported that hackers sponsored by China's People's Liberation Army had resumed attacks on U.S. targets. According to the GAO, the number of cyber incidents reported by federal agencies to U.S. computer emergency readiness teams has increased by 782% in 6 years. As Vice Chair of the full committee, I offered a discussion framework, the Secure IT Act, to provide our government, business community, and citizens with tools and resources needed to protect themselves from those who wish us harm. The 5 major components that make up the Secure IT Act are, number 1, allow the government and the private sector to share cyber threat information in a more transparent fashion. Number 2, reform how our government protects its own information systems. Number 3, create new deterrents for cyber criminals. Number 4, prioritize R&D for cybersecurity initiatives. And number 5, streamline consumers' ability to be notified when they are at risk of identity theft and financial harm. One of the things we know is that cybersecurity is uniquely ill-suited for federal regulation. Rapid changes in technology guarantee the failure of static, prescriptive approaches. Our focus should be on developing consensus public policy that puts American businesses in the driver's seat and allows cooperation and collaboration, not top-down, one-size-fits-all models. NIST written testimony on implementing the framework of the executive order states, any efforts to better protect critical infrastructure need to be supported and implemented by the owners and operators of this infrastructure. It also reflects the reality that many in the private sector are already doing the right things to protect their systems and should not be diverted from those efforts through new requirements. Private solutions, not government presumptions, offer the best prospect for our future cyber defenses. As we explore ways to incentivize the private sector to diminish our exposure to cyber threats, we must ensure the executive order stays true to the voluntary cooperative standard. Likewise, Congress and the executive branch should refrain from further exploring legislative regulatory proposals given DHS authority to impose critical infrastructure requirements, as our government is purportedly already in the midst of working with the private sector to draft a voluntary cybersecurity framework. I look forward to the testimony and appreciate each and every one of our 9 witnesses' thoughtful answers to our questions this morning. At this time, is there any member seeking the remainder of the time? I yield back my time. And Mr. Waxman, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
At this time, I will begin the questioning, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I want to talk with you first about what you are doing with this framework, because I think all of us it came to our attention that Secretary Napolitano, in congressional testimony earlier this year, was still seeking legislation giving DHS the authority to impose the critical infrastructure requirements. And it probably struck many of us odd, I know it did me, that you all are working on this and are looking at a voluntary cybersecurity framework. And so shouldn't the administration wait to see whether your process creates an effective cybersecurity framework before asking for new statutory authority to impose regulations?
So I think the executive order lays out a clear goal of a voluntary-based system. We agree that the first priority is to allow the market to attempt to address this needed level of cybersecurity performance. That being said, so the executive order lays out sort of two goals once the framework is in place. One is a program to promote adoption of the framework, this voluntary framework by industry, and the other is a recognition that some of these sectors are already regulated. So we would like to see the framework used as a way to harmonize this. I think it would be a mistake that we would do all this work on a broad multi-sector framework for cybersecurity and then not have those practices embraced by those existing regulatory entities. So it really contains both of those pieces.
Well, let me ask you this then. Why do you think the administration issued the executive order if they knew that you were already working and trying to create the framework? And do you think that there is going to be any further push for legislation? If you've got a year, you're going to meet a deadline within a year, you say you're 8 months away from delivering a product, you're holding your workshops, the multi-stakeholder workshops, you're bringing people to the table, so why are they bothering to issue the executive order and then ask for more legislation?
So the executive order serves to basically align roles and responsibilities across the existing agencies. And you see that in the executive order, that it choreographs the role of Homeland Security, NIST, and other players in a process within our existing authorities. So you're correct. What we're doing now doesn't require any legislation. My personal view is that the primary need for legislation is going to become more important as we look at the implementation and the adoption of the framework. The real win in a framework process is that cybersecurity, good cybersecurity is good business. And I think that what we're going to be looking at is what are the obstacles that get in the way of adoption of this framework? Where are the areas where these practices require incentives and other or maybe removing barriers to adoption? And so I think the ongoing discussion that's been happening with Congress will likely continue. The administration looks forward to working with Congress on this, but I think industry won't need our help developing the framework, but they may need our help looking at areas where there are barriers to putting this into meaningful use.
Well, and I think that what we're hearing from industry is that good cybersecurity, solid cybersecurity steps are an imperative. They're not something that is just good business, but they are something that are an imperative every single day, whether it's financial networks, whether it's the grid, as Mr. Waxman referenced, whether it's some of our health IT organizations. We are hearing, when you look at the number of attacks and the step up in that, such as the PLA attacks, you know that it is an imperative. With that, Mr. Waxman, I yield you 5 minutes for questions.